All right, so now we're looking at Daniel chapter 8. We've done Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, Daniel chapter 8. Guess what is coming next week? Daniel chapter 9. There we go. All right, so it's not too difficult. All right? So let's start. We're going to be reading it on the page. It says this in verse 1. In the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign, this is still the king of Babylon, I, Daniel, had a vision after the one that already appeared to me. Remember now, Daniel 7, he had his first vision. This is his second one. In my vision, I saw myself in the citadel of Susa in the province of Elam. In the vision, I was beside the Ulai Canal. This is all in Babylon, modern-day Iraq. All of these places we mentioned, these ancient places in Babylon. I looked up, and there before me was a ram with 2 horns. I had a quick discussion with someone earlier. These are not real animals. These are symbols and visions of something else. All right. I saw a ram with 2 horns standing beside the canal, and the horns were long. One of the horns was longer than the other, but grew up later. I watched the ram as he charged towards the west, the north, and the south. Just underline that, west, north, and south. The reason why Daniel is giving us that information, because we can determine where it comes from. Which one is missing? East. So we know that the ram comes from the east. No animal could stand against it, and no one could rescue from his power. It did as it pleased and became great. So we just read in the verses, the commentary is very much the same. Daniel has a vision of a ram with 2 horns. It charges towards the west, the north, and the south, indicating that it is from the east. All right, we're not reading anything into it. We're just letting the Bible speak for itself. Okay, let's continue. It says in verse 5, and I was thinking about this, suddenly a goat with a prominent horn between its eyes came up from the west. Remember, the ram came from the east. So now the goat comes from the other side, the west, crossing the whole earth without touching the ground. It came towards the 2-horned ram I had seen beside the canal and charged at it at great rage. I saw it attack the ram furiously, striking the ram and shattering its horns. Its 2 horns. The ram was powerless to stand against it. The goat knocked it to the ground and trampled on it, and none could rescue the ram from his power. The goat became great, but at its height of its power, the large horn was broken off, and in its place 4 prominent horns grew up towards the 4 winds of heaven. So thus far, he's just got a vision of 2 animals, a ram and a goat fighting. Who wins? The goat. All right. The goat wins and tramples the ram. And that's all we know so far. We're not going to read into it yet, the interpretation. We're just reading the vision. So there's 2 animals fighting. The one beats the other. The goat has this very big horn on its head, one single horn. That eventually breaks, and 4 smaller horns come out of that horn. All right. That's all he says. That's all we got so far. So the commentary on that one is Daniel has a vision of a goat with 1 horn. It comes from the west. So there's 2 factions at war with each other, one from the west, one from the east. The goat defeats a ram. The goat becomes great, but at the height of its power, the large horn was broken off, and in its place 4 prominent horns. Are there any questions so far? There shouldn't really be. All right, it's just a commentary on what Daniel has said. So let's look at verse 9. It says, we just ended with 4 prominent horns. All right, let me just make sure that's on verse 8. I'll read that last sentence. It says its 4 prominent horns came up towards the 4 winds of heaven. The very next line in verse 9 says, out of one of them came another horn. So out of these 4 horns comes another horn. Above that, write little horn. Because this is in reference to the little horn of Daniel chapter 7. The same horn. Who is the little horn? The Antichrist. So what Daniel's telling us is giving us more information to where this Antichrist is coming from. So far from our last lesson, we got that he comes from the old Roman Empire. That could be anywhere in Europe, anywhere in the Middle East, even North Africa. It's a bit of a wide area to look at. Now what he's doing, he's zoning it down. He's cutting it down and saying, okay, that same horn that we spoke about is now going to come from 4 places. Dun, dun, dun. All right, so that's where we get into. And so far we don't know where, we just know that it comes out of those 4. It says, which started small, but grew in power to the south and the east and towards the beautiful land. The beautiful land is Israel. Israel, Canaan, the promised land, Zion, all the other beautiful names of it. It grew until it reached the host of the heavens and threw some of the starry host down to the earth and trampled on them. It set up itself as great as the commander of the army of the Lord. It took away the daily sacrifice from the Lord, and his sanctuary was thrown down. The sacrifice and the sanctuary are in reference to the temple and the Jewish sacrifices. So this person, Jew, we're talking about, this horn is going to take away the sacrifices of the Jews, and he's going to overthrow the temple or the sanctuary. And it already says that he goes towards the beautiful land, which is Israel. All right. It says, because of rebellion, the Lord's people. Who's the Lord's people? Israel, the Jews. This is not Christians. This is not the church. And the daily sacrifice was given over to it. The reference in there for the it all the time is because he's talking about a horn. The horn is a it. All right. But as he goes forward, it becomes clear that this horn is actually a person. It says, it prospered in everything it did, and truth was thrown to the ground. Then I heard a Holy One speak, and another Holy One said to him, how long will it take for this vision to be fulfilled? The vision concerning the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, and the surrender of the sanctuary, and the trampling underfoot of the Lord's people. A couple of things is going to happen. There's going to be sacrifices taken away. There's going to be rebellion or desolation. He's talking about the sanctuary or the temple being thrown underfoot, and also the Lord's people, the Jews, being attacked. All right, so just from that we understand where this is taking place. Jerusalem. Because that's where the temple is, that's where the Lord's people is, that's where the sacrifices are. So all of this will happen around Jerusalem and Israel and the time of the end. He said to me, it will take 2,300 evenings and mornings. Then the sanctuary will be reconsecrated. That 2,300 evenings and mornings, talk on a correction, I can't really remember. I think it's 6.3 years. You can check that on your calculator. At 6.3 years, remember we speak about the 7 years of tribulation? So the 7 is always prominent, 3.5 years is always prominent. For some reason, this one is kind of short of that, not 100% sure why. But within that 7-year period, this will take place. Maybe at the 6 years and 3 months of that period. The commentary is this, at the bottom of the page, out of the 4 horns arises another horn corresponding to the little horn of Daniel 7. Okay, so we got that part. He will take away the daily sacrifices in the temple. Before I carry on, currently in Jerusalem, is there a temple? No. So for this to be fulfilled, there must be a temple and the Jews must continue their sacrifices. That hasn't happened yet for a very, very long time. Since 70 AD. Almost 2,000 years have passed. So we're waiting for the fulfillment of this prophecy, where this little horn will come into the temple, which maybe he will even build, and stop the sacrifices and attack the Jews, as the prophecy says. All right, let's read that Matthew 24 section. Matthew 24, one of my favorite controversial chapters in the whole Bible. Jesus is talking about the tribulation. Very clear, he states that. He says what will happen in that 7 years. This is one part he talks about. He says in verse 3, as Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will this happen? And what will be the sign of the coming, of your coming, and of the end of the age? So the disciples, the apostles, come to him and say, Jesus, when will all this stuff happen? When you will return? The end of the age. And he says, so when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Judea is the lower part of the kingdom of Israel at the time of Jesus. So he says, when you see this abomination of desolation, and he references Daniel, not only just like a blasé quote, he actually says, as spoken through the prophet Daniel. He says, when you see this happening, this abomination of desolation in the temple in Jerusalem, then the end of the end of that age will come. The end of that 7-year period. All right. So now what I want us to do is look at one more verse in the Bible. So if you have your Bibles, no matter what translation, open up to Daniel chapter 9. Daniel chapter 9:27. While you're doing that, while you're listening to me also, in Daniel chapter 8, the last part in verse 13, Daniel talks about the taking away of the sacrifices. He says the rebellion that causes desolation. All right? Keep that in mind. And then Daniel 9:27. Unfortunately, I have to get that. This is the chapter we're going to be doing next week, talking about the 70-week prophecy. We will not be doing all of it, obviously, only the part about the 70 weeks. There's one verse in there that I just want to draw attention to now. We're not going to get into the whole detail, just that one verse, verse 27. And just so you know, this is talking about the Antichrist and what he'll do. All right. It says this in verse 27, he will confirm a covenant with many, a contract with many for 1/7, that is for 7 years. In the middle of the 7 years, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering, just what he says in Daniel chapter 8. And on the wing of, this is NIV, and on the wing of the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation. The exact same phrase that Jesus says in Matthew 24. And it's the exact same thing that Daniel's talking about in Daniel chapter 8. The rebellion that causes desolation. Until the end that is decreed and is poured out on him. So that's the only part I want you. On your lesson, you can write Daniel 9:27 as a cross-reference to Matthew 24. And that's also good because Jesus said, when you see this happening in the temple that Daniel spoke about, then it will be the end of the age. And from the time of Jesus till now, we haven't seen that happen. So we're still waiting for this abomination of desolation to happen, to take place. And what it is, it's basically something very, very bad that will take place in the temple. The idea is that the Antichrist will set up an image of himself in the temple and force people to worship. And that's what Jesus is referring to. All right, and we'll talk about that probably next week again. All right, so that is the abomination of desolation, and that's what Daniel is speaking about in this very chapter we're speaking about. All right, then over the page, we're all over the page, we're looking at verse 15. So this is now the interpretation. Remember, most of the prophecies in the Bible are given. If you just continue to read and be patient with the prophecy, you'll find the interpretation. As we found so far in Daniel chapter 2 and Daniel chapter 7. The same year. In verse 15 it says, while I, Daniel, was watching the vision and trying to understand it, there before me stood one who looked like a man, and I heard a man's voice from the Ulai calling, Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of the vision. And he came near the place where I was standing. I was terrified and fell prostrate. Son of man, he said to me, understand the vision concerns the time of the end. While he was speaking to me, I was in a deep sleep with my face to the ground. Then he touched me and raised me to my feet. He said, I'm going to tell you what will happen, the later time of wrath, because the vision concerns the appointed time to the end. He mentions it 3 times, time of the end, point of wrath and judgment, time of the end. All right. And then it says in verse 20, this is an important one. This is the actual interpretation of these 2 animals we saw. The 2-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. Now, I just want to bring your attention to the fact that that's not my commentary. That's what the Bible says. All right, which is awesome. Daniel doesn't leave us in the dark. He doesn't let us guess from history what it is. He tells us the shaggy goat is Media Persia. Or the two-horned ram is Media Persia. And then in verse 21, he says the shaggy goat is the king of Greece, the Grecian Empire. And the large horn between its eyes is its first king. So the shaggy goat is Greece. It did have a first king of the empire. Who do you think that person was? Alexander the Great. Yeah, all right. So the great thing about this part of the prophecy is Daniel doesn't let us guess. He doesn't let us look back on history. He tells us, listen, and remember this was Babylon when he was writing this. He knew that Greece was there and Persia was there, but he would have no idea that they were going to conquer anything. But he already prophesied that. And he said, basically, after Babylon, Media Persia is going to come. Media Persia is going to fight against Greece, and Greece is going to win. And he mentions this one prominent king. The first emperor of the Grecian Empire was Alexander the Great. All right, and this is one of the first times in the book of Daniel where the interpretation is spot on. As again, no assumption. We don't have to look at history. We can read the verse and he interprets it for us. All right. If he didn't say that, we can still guess. You can say, Raymond, you're just guessing what those countries are. Not now. He tells us exactly who they are. All right. And again, they confirm what he said earlier. Remember, I think we went over the empires. Can you remember what the first one was? Babylon, then Persia, and then Greece, and then Rome. So please remember those 4 empires. So we already established those ones are in succession. And here he tells us exactly the same thing. But he's only focusing on the two of them. He's not worried about the others for now. He's only interested in the Media, Persia, and Greece. And then in verse 22, he says the four horns that replaced the one that was broken off represent four kingdoms. So we don't have to guess what the four horns are. It's four kingdoms that will emerge from this nation, from his nation, from Greece, but will not have the same power. All right, so that last part is very important. That's why I underlined all of it, because the interpretation is unclear. No assumption, no opinions. It says everything right there. And then the commentary is basically the same. It says the ram represents the Media-Persian Empire. I think I told you before, Media-Persia, the reason there's a hyphen between the two, because these were two tribes or factions in one empire. The Medes and the Persians. So it's maybe somewhere on the page, just for your information, write these words. Darius the Mede. Darius, D-A-R-I-U-S. The Mede, M-E-D-E. He was the ruler of the Median Empire. And then the next person I want to write is Cyrus the Great of Persia. Cyrus, C-Y-R-U-S. C-Y-R-U-S. And he's from the Persian Empire. All right. So they both ruled the empire. Darius ruled for a few years and he died, and Cyrus or Cyrus took over. All right. That's why we got Media Persia. I just like to refer to it as Persia because Cyrus had most of the say all the time. All right. But that's what's Media Persia. The goat represents the Grecian Empire. The large horn represents Alexander the Great, the first king, the first emperor of the empire. After his death, his kingdom was divided between his four generals. When he died of malaria in India, he didn't have an heir to the throne, so his kingdom was divided between his four generals. And that is an historical fact that did happen. And these four regions, underline these ones please, Greece, Turkey, Syria, and Egypt. And also underline that word regions. When the empire was divided, although it was divided into Greece, Turkey, Syria, and Egypt, these regions are not the same countries as we see today. Not exactly. All right. For example, Egypt controlled Egypt and a large part of Israel up to Syria. All right. So it wasn't only the Egypt country we see. Same as Syria. In this time, it wasn't just a country we know as Syria. It actually included everything from Turkey to India. All right. We'll get to that when we look at the map. That's why I just want to understand the regions. So now that we've understood that Alexander died, his empire was divided into four regions. Remember what I said about the little horn of the Antichrist? He'll come from one of these four. So at this point in our lesson, we can deduce that the Antichrist will come from one of these places, because that's what Daniel 8 says. The little horn will emerge from one of these four. So now we don't have to guess about Europe no more. We don't have to guess about Russia no more. China, definitely not South Africa. They will never be on the list. So the first point of entry for you to, at this point, assume where the Antichrist comes from, it will have to be one of these areas. Are we happy so far? And again, all we've done was we've read the verses. We haven't put anything into it. All right? We've read Daniel, and that's exactly what it says. It says these regions were at continual war with one another. That's unfortunately what happens all the time. The empire was divided, and then instead of uniting and actually building a greater empire, what they done was they just fought with each other all the time. The four kings fought with each other, right? That's the four regions. Syria is referred to as the king of the north. That's important. And then the Egypt part is referred to as the king of the south. I don't know why Daniel doesn't just name them by countries. He calls them the king of the north and the king of the south. All right? So we will get to that afterwards. So let's carry on reading verses 23, and then we'll end off by looking at Daniel chapter 11. Are we all on the same page so far? Has anybody got any question or comment so far? Nothing. Good. All right. Verse 23. Another question from me. Are you understanding that part so far? Let me look at your faces. Any glazed looks? So far, so good, yeah. It's not that difficult. Here we go. Left. All right. Let's read from verse 23. In the latter part of their reign. This is where it could get a little bit wobbly, because it says in the latter part of their reign. That could be in the immediate part of the reign of Syria and Egypt, or in the latter part, like 2,000 years down the line. But anyway, we carry on reading. It says, when rebels have become completely wicked, A fierce-looking king, a master of intrigue, will arise. He will become very strong, but not by his own power. He will cause astounding devastation and will succeed in whatever he does. Now, before I carry on, this is in reference to the horn, the little horn. Remember, it was saying it. Now that little horn becomes he. All right, it gives the characteristics of this little horn. It says, he will destroy those who are mighty, the holy people. We know who that is, Jews, Israel. He will cause deceit to prosper, and he will consider himself superior. When they feel secure, he will destroy many. That's also important. Just underline secure. In Thessalonians, it talks about the same thing. When the people shout out peace and safety, then devastation and destruction will come. That's what it says in Thessalonians. The idea that I can get into that quickly is the Antichrist will make a contract of peace with the Jews. And for the first time in history, literally, there will be peace in that land. There will be no armies fighting, no Iron Dome. They'll press a button, Iron Dome will be off for a while. It'll all be peace and safety. They'll be secure in the land. No Muslim countries around them will want to kill them. All right? And then halfway through that contract, halfway through the 7 years, he breaks that contract and he wages war against them. And that's what this part is talking about. So there will be a time when they will feel secure, but just as they're starting to get too secure, then he wages war against them. It says, when they feel secure, he will destroy many and take his stand against the prince of princes. Who do you think the prince of princes is in the capital P? Jesus. Yeah. So this person will take a stand, not a spiritual stand, will take a physical stand against Jesus. And that has not happened yet, any time in history. No matter how bad the dictators have been, no one has stood up against Jesus before. The Antichrist will get that unfortunate surprise to do that, all right, at the end when Jesus returns. He will be destroyed, but not by his own power, by human power. He actually gets destroyed by Jesus. If you read Revelation, Jesus comes and he takes the Antichrist by the scruff of his neck and he throws him into the lake of fire. He doesn't get destroyed by any person or any being. Jesus actually destroys him. The vision of the evenings and mornings that have been given are true, but seal up this vision, for it concerns a distant future. So there we can understand that doesn't necessarily mean in the 100 years, it means a long time, distant future. I, Daniel, was worn out. I lay exhausted for several days, and I got up and went about the king's business. I was appalled by the vision. It was beyond understanding. All right, let's read the commentary, and then we'll start looking at our Bibles. It says in the commentary, these verses describe a fierce-looking king that will arise. While often linked to a person called Antiochus Epiphanes. Next to that, you can write what Epiphanes means. There's two different translations for that word. That's where we get our word epiphany. Epiphany comes from the word that means manifestation. All right? So if you get an epiphany, you get a manifestation. So that word Epiphanes in Antiochus, there's two things I want to write. The first one is God. So Epiphanes means you are like God. So he chose that name because he wants to be like God. So that's the first thing you can say, like God. And then there's another translation of the same word, which is the one I like better, madman. Right? He thinks he's like God, but actually he's a nutball. All right? He's mad. So the Epiphanes can go either way. Obviously, he chose it because he wants to be like God, as God manifest. He thinks he is God. I like the other one. Because he was such a nutball, people actually gave him the name. It's kind of spelled just a little bit differently, which means madman. So they actually made fun of him. They changed that name to be madman. All right, so I'm going to read that and then I'll give you what the commentary is. It says, they're saying that these verses that we just read from 23 to 27 is often linked to Antiochus Epiphanes. Some interpretations view this verse as prophetic, foreshadowing the future Antichrist. This is what you'll see on YouTube videos. This is what you'll probably see in your study Bibles right now. If you read these verses, there should be a commentary that speaks about this person, Antiochus Epiphanes. He was one of the kings of Syria. And he was a nutball. He done everything that the stuff talks about. He attacked the Jews. He stopped sacrifices. He done really, really bad things. He killed, and on one time, he killed 40,000 Jews in one of his raids. So he was he didn't like the Jews. He was a real evil guy. And there's one really, really bad thing that he done, which topples all the rest. He took a pig into the temple and sacrifice the pig on the altar. Yeah, you don't do that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? If you're an upset God, go do that. But you can unclean animal into the temple and he sacrificed it. So when we hear about the abomination of desolation, people think that that's what it's about. They said that Antiochus fulfilled all of these things. He hated the Jews, he killed them, he done the abomination, he sacrificed a pig. And that's why some scholars, even Christians, say that these verses is to do with Antiochus. It's already been fulfilled. It's not distant future. It's not to come. It's already been done and dusted. Right. And you will see that in some study Bibles. I hold to the second part of the view. I hold that these verses is still to happen. The one main reason for that is because no one has ever stood against the prince of princes. Antiochus has never done that. And he died by human power. All right. So part of this verses can be attributed to Antiochus because he done some of the same things, but not everything. All right. So everything, in my view, must still be fulfilled in the future. And this will be fulfilled by the Antichrist. The Antiochus is like a foreshadow of the Antichrist. Whatever Antiochus done, the Antichrist is going to do times 100. He's going to do just things worse. All right. He's also going to kill the people. He's also going to destroy the temple and do bad things. All right. So that's my view. This is what the church endorses. And this is what most scholars of prophecy endorse. If you're a scholar of prophecy, this is the future Antichrist. But as I said, you will see Antiochus Epiphanes come up in all Bible studies. As long as they understand that Antiochus was bad and he could have fulfilled some of these, but as long as your Bible studies, your lessons or whatever, actually point and say, but it is also the future Antichrist, then I'm happy. But when it just says dogmatically that it's Antiochus, then there's a problem because he hasn't fulfilled all of these things yet. Let's continue reading. At the right at the bottom of the page, it says the character of the Antichrist is also given in Daniel 11, which we're going to be reading. It talks about the king of the north, Syria, and he will defeat the king of the south, Egypt. And here it comes to where he comes from. There is good reason to deduct that the Antichrist will come from this Syrian region, which today includes the modern-day countries of Syria, Iraq, Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, and you can even include Pakistan if you want to, because that is part of the old Syrian Empire. So what we're going to read now in Daniel chapter 11, it talks about the king of the north. And what we've just understood from Daniel chapter 8 is that Antichrist will come from one of these kingdoms. And then in 11, he focuses on only one kingdom, the Syrian kingdom. And he talks about this king of the north. And then in Daniel chapter 11, what we're going to see now is that there's also a good indication in that chapter that he's talking about the Antichrist. So from that, we can deduce that the Antichrist comes from the king of the north, and he was the king of Syria. And Syrian Empire consisted of those countries. So the Antichrist can only come, biblically speaking, from Syria, Iraq, Turkey, Iran, or Afghanistan. So that does help us to eliminate anybody else. So if anybody else comes to you and says the Antichrist comes from Australia, you can point to this and say, based on Daniel chapter 11, there's a very good chance that he won't come from Australia. He will come from the Syrian region. And they can choose a couple of countries there, but it can't be outside of it. That's why I like Daniel chapter 8 is one of my favorite chapters because it really zones down into where the Antichrist comes from and eliminates all the sensationalism and all the hogwash out there. All right. So let's go to Daniel chapter 8 and we're going to quickly read Daniel chapter 11. Thank you, Maureen. You wouldn't say I'm 36, eh? What are you laughing at? So Daniel chapter 8 is finished, done and dusted. You go and look it up in your own Bibles and read the translation. It will say the same stuff. What we've done in this lesson, it won't be different from your Bibles. All right. So now in Daniel chapter 11, I just want to go through headings. Go to verse 1, Daniel chapter 11, verse 1 and verse 2. I just want to read the headings. My Bible's got headings. My one says the kings of the south and the north. Does anybody else have something like that? Egypt and Syria is even better because then it tells. Sorry? Conflicts to come, that's it. Yeah. So this is a great chapter. What it starts with from verse 1 to 35 is the conflict between Egypt and Syria in great detail. And the great, amazing thing about chapter 11 is being historically fulfilled. 100% accuracy. Even historians have said that this can't be true. This must have been written after the fact because of the detail that he gives. Daniel gives a detail of exactly what will happen, who marries who fights who. And the historians have actually said this can't be before the time because it's far too accurate. The great thing about God in the Bible, it is. It's a prophecy before it happened. And it's accurate, 100% accuracy. The historians are even amazed that Daniel goes into all this detail. And a great study, I've tried to do it. It's a bit lengthy and a bit long-winded, but you can. You can go to Google and do a study on chapter 11. It will give you the verses and then the historical commentary of every verse, because every verse has a commentary. And even Cleopatra the sixth or whatever, she's mentioned in here, and it goes into great details, all right? But that you can do on your own time. It does, even for me, who loves the Bible, it goes over my head. It's just too much history. Because it's like 100 years of negotiations and fighting and contracts and stuff like that. The important part, what we want to look at, is verse 36. This is where the historians have a problem with Daniel. So from 1 to 35, the historians are happy, the Bible scholars are happy. Daniel, you're awesome. I don't know how you could have done this. It's 100% accuracy. Until we get to verse 36 onwards. Then the historians look at us and say, the rest of the chapter doesn't make sense. This hasn't been fulfilled yet. None of this stuff has happened as history dictates it. So then there must be something wrong. Either Daniel's wrong or these verses haven't been fulfilled yet. And that's the view we take. All right. So now we're going to read a couple of those verses. We're going to sprint through them. And these verses start talking about a person, a king that will come, king of the north. So now we know that's from the king of Syria. We know for a fact that these verses haven't been fulfilled. So we're waiting for this still to happen. We're waiting for the king of the north, a king from Syria, to still fulfill these passages. And we've already deduced that that will be the Antichrist. All right. My heading above 36 says, the king who exalts himself. And the reason some Bibles have a break there is because of the break in the momentum. All of this is history, all been fulfilled until 35. Even the people that put the headings on understood there's something different happened here. Because no more is this history, this is something else. All right. And then it starts off and it says this in verse 36, the king will do as he pleases. He will exalt and magnify himself above every god and will say unheard of things against the God of gods. The God of gods is Yahweh or Jesus, God, our God. This is the Antichrist. Remember, the very name Antichrist means anti-God. You will not have any spiritual enlightenment in him whatsoever. You will not have, you'll hate God, you'll hate Jesus, you'll hate the church, you'll hate the Bible, you'll hate Christians. Anti. All right. He will exalt himself above everyone else and say bad things about God. He will be successful until the time of wrath is completed. The time of wrath is the time of judgment, the end of the 7-year period. All right. That comes up quite often in Daniel, at least. It talks about the time of the wrath. It's talking about the end of the 7 years. For what has been determined must take place. He will show no regard for the gods of his fathers. I'm reading from the NIV, so you might have plural or singular stuff. He will not have any regard for the gods of his fathers or for the one desired by woman, nor will he regard any god, but will exalt himself above them all. Instead of them, he will honor a god of fortresses, a god unknown to his fathers. He will honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts. So now all of that in context is to do with gods. And you can read that. He thinks himself as a God, he exalts himself as God, and he doesn't regard any other God. The God of his fathers, the God of woman, the God of this, God of that. It does reference that he will give his allegiance to a foreign God. So although he sees himself as a God, there will be some allegiance with some foreign God, unknown God that he has. It says he will attack the mightiest fortresses with the help of a foreign God, and or for that matter, it could be Satan himself, a foreign God. Although he's not a God, he's an angel. So I don't think it's that. A foreign God, and will greatly honor those who acknowledge him. He will make them rulers of many people and will distribute the land at a price. So far, that's just a characteristic of the person. The historians don't have too much of a problem with that section because they figure, okay, that's just characteristics. It's somebody's phone going off, or is it my phone? Sounds like my phone. Just ignore that in the background. It says this. This is a part where the historians have issue with because he had mentioned things that have never happened before. At the time of the end, the king of the south would engage him in battle, and the king of the north will storm out against him with chariots and cavalry and great fleet of ships. He will invade many countries and will sweep through them like a flood. He will also invade the beautiful land, Israel. Many countries will fall, but Edom, Moab, and the leaders of Ammon will be delivered from his hand. He will conquer a lot of people, but strangely enough, this section, Edom, Moab, and Ammon, they won't be conquered by him. This is modern day Jordan. He will extend his power over many countries. Egypt will not escape. He will gain control of the treasures of gold and silver and the riches of Egypt and the Libyans and Nubians in submission. So again, as I say, historians, this never happened in history. Syria, the Syrian region, never conquered these places. So we're waiting for this to be fulfilled. And it can only be fulfilled by the Antichrist. We can't deduce that. Now, he's the king of the north. But reports from the east and the north will alarm him, and he will set out in a great rage to destroy and annihilate many. So it's not only the Jews that he's after. This guy becomes like a completely whack job. And he just goes on a complete warpath throughout the Middle East and Europe. All right? Because it says that he goes down, he defeats Egypt. While he's there, he hears something happen up north and takes his army up there and destroys them and kills and kills and kills and kills. Eventually, all of this culminates when he gathers all the armies together at a place called Armageddon, okay, in Israel. This is just the prelude to that. He's killing everyone and getting all his armies together. And eventually, this all culminates when they all come together at Armageddon. Armageddon. It says here, he will pitch his royal tents between the seas and the beautiful holy mountain. The beautiful holy mountain is Mount Zion. So it's an indication here that he will probably set up his base camp in Jerusalem, or at least in Israel, somewhere in Israel. And the seas reference to the Mediterranean seas, or sea. Yet he will come to an end, but no one will help him. Ach, shame, eh? All right, so there we've read Daniel chapter 11. We've read the whole chapter of Daniel chapter 8. We have deduced that the Antichrist can come from the Syrian Empire. Now quickly look at your map. Dun, dun, dun. This one that I gave you today. It says in the right-hand corner, the four kingdoms of the Greek Empire after 300 BC. This is when the Grecian Empire kind of took hold. And then the colors is what I'll bring your attention to. To the left-hand side, we see the pink. That's Greece. It does actually say Greece under Cassander. And then next to the pink, you'll see a bit of purple, the north part of Turkey. That purple part is Turkey. All right, so don't look at the actual names, because the red names are the names of the current countries. That purple area, that area in the time of Alexander was called Turkey. All right, and then you can see Syria. That's that yellow part. Syria was the largest part of the empire. All that yellow part, and it included Turkey, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and even a little bit of Pakistan. All right. So if I say Syria, I don't mean the country Syria. I mean any one of those countries. All right. Then the last part at the bottom is Egypt. And again, Egypt was not only the country, it occupied a bit of Libya and definitely a bit of Israel up north. All right. So looking at the map again, the Antichrist is the king of the north from the Syrian Empire. So he will have to come from one of those countries. And it's speculation after this to deduce which one. We can just guess. Your guess is as good as mine. We can, using our common sense and biblical knowledge, eliminate one or two of them. All right? I will eliminate Afghanistan and Pakistan. They just don't seem to be there. Right? They've never had a part to play in anything regarding Israel or Bible or prophecies or anything. So I can eliminate them. This is just me, my personal opinion. The other one I'll eliminate is Jordan. We just said that from Daniel chapter 11, they're going to be spared. So he won't come from there if they're going to be delivered from his hand. So then we're left with Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. And if you look at modern day history in Israel, the countries that are fighting currently is Iran. Turkey is always in the forefront of history, always hell-bent on destroying Israel. They've got a good military force. They've got a great job of a leader. The ones that are not too much in the news currently is like Syria and Iraq. We don't often hear of them. I don't know if they're going to be a part of this. If you could choose out of the four, Turkey and Iran would be good choices, good candidates. But I wouldn't say that Syria and Iraq are out of the picture yet. Maybe something in the future happens when they rise to power and there's a leader that takes over there and he becomes the Antichrist. Iran is obviously a big candidate because of its nuclear facilities. But it's really, I can't even give you my own opinion. We definitely, from Daniel 18:11, it will have to be one of those countries. And that's as far as we can go for now. So that's it. So that now tells us a bit more about the characteristic of the Antichrist and almost pinpointing where he will come from. And again, that eliminates a lot of other countries. So you don't have to guess no more where he comes from and what he will do. Just read Daniel chapter 8 and Daniel chapter 11, the last part. All right. Are there any questions regarding the Antichrist?